Today's Care.com webinar, Caught in the Middle, Supporting the Sandwich Generation at Work. I'm Sarah Hamill, and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you find today's session informative and engaging. Today we will discuss who the sandwich generation demographic is. We'll look at organizational trends and challenges when it comes to supporting these employees. We'll take a look at best practices when it comes to benefits and program offerings. And we'll take a deeper look into MIT's unique story of addressing the needs of their sandwich generation employees. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our panelists today. We have Jody Gastrand, our VP of Senior Care here at Care.com, and we have Ronnie Mae Weiss, Work-Life Manager at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Work-Life Center. I'd like to thank them both very much for being here with us today. During the webinar, please feel free to submit questions using the chat or questions box in your GoToWebinar interface. We will address all of these questions at the conclusion of the event in a QA session. Also, just a note that you'll be receiving a copy of the webinar deck in addition to the recorded link within the next 2 days. With that, I will hand it over to Jody. Jody, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Sarah, and thank you all for taking the time to attend this webinar on sandwich generation caregivers. And I'm really delighted to be here today with my friend and colleague, Ronnie Mae Weiss from MIT. And I think that the initiatives at MIT will really well illustrate how best to provide support to caregivers across the continuum. So I want to begin today with a little synopsis of my story. 10 years ago, I felt like I was the poster child for the sandwich generation caregiver. Had 3 teenagers at home. The oldest was in the process of applying to college, which takes a lot of parental attention. Middle one was in high school, and the youngest was in the early throes of a tumultuous adolescence. And I was working full-time. My husband traveled for business, and my parents, who lived 2 hours away, were dealing with my dad's dementia. And I was constantly running back and forth to help out, to deal with crises, to figure out what kind of a plan would best suit my dad's needs. And at the time, there was really very little conversation in the workplace about supporting caregivers. And I kept most of the stress to myself and just soldiered on, which I think many caregivers today do. On one occasion, my dad was living with us, and my mom was in the hospital having a hip replacement, and the caregiver I had hired didn't show up. I had no concept of backup care or respite care, so what did I do? I actually took my dad to work with me that day. Not really a great long-term solution, but I had to do what I had to do. So that really leads me to the both the challenges and the potential rewards of being a sandwich generation caregiver. There are 24 million Americans who are really in this role, and they are caught in the middle. And really they are the caregiving employees. On one end is the children who need their attention. On the other end are aging parents. And in some cases, they're all living under one roof. And this is really an unprecedented phenomenon that we are approaching now in this country and really globally because of the fact that our population is aging. And we are dealing with people who are living longer with chronic illnesses. And the caregiving adult children are trying to manage it all. And more of them are, in fact, in the workplace. The majority of caregivers, about 60%, are juggling the care of parents, maybe grandparents, children, and their jobs. And what usually ends up paying the price is the workplace and the caregiver's health. So one of the trends that we're going to look at is how do we prevent that from happening? How do we keep people engaged in their jobs, feeling good about their caregiving responsibilities, and not sacrificing themselves in the process? One of the interesting trends now, we think of sandwich generation caregivers or caregivers in general, members of the baby boomer generation. And those of you who are among the proud members like myself of this generation, we are turning 65 at a rate of 10,000 people a day. So soon we will be the ones that our children are caring for. And one of the trends that a recent Pew Research study showed is that the Gen Xers, the ones who are in their 40s, are starting to move into this sandwich generation slot. And most of them are working, and they also have younger children at home. Another interesting trend is that family caregivers are providing financial support. And a recent MetLife study showed that that equates to approximately $5,000 a year. And that's paying for anything from in-home caregivers to transportation to co-pays for medication. Long-distance caregivers actually pay upwards of $8,000 a year. So in addition to the emotional and physical demands, there's also a financial impact. We also know that caregivers experience a higher level of stress, of chronic illness, are more prone to depression, are less likely to seek out their own preventive care. And they are too busy running around taking care of everyone else. And I'm sure you've heard of the mantra of you must take care of yourself first. Well, this is something that actually is not a frill. It's not a nice to have. It's a must-have. So part of what we do when we are supporting caregiving employees is to teach them how to do that. And right now, we're 4 out of 10 women in the workforce are the primary breadwinners. We also see a higher number of women who are primary caregivers. So this sort of dual primary role can have a very stressful impact, particularly on women who see themselves as being able to do it all and are less likely to cry for help. So having been in a similar situation myself, I know firsthand from experience, as well as working with hundreds and hundreds of caregivers, that being able to work in a company or organization that acknowledges this issue and directly offers supports can be hugely impactful. So I mentioned before this longevity trend, unprecedented, and it's a global phenomenon. And there are many upsides to the fact that people are living longer. They're actually able to work longer. We have an aging workforce, and many of the older old are actually staying healthy and active. But at the same time, we have increased rates of dementia. Your likelihood of having dementia after the age of 85, which by the way is the fastest growing demographic, is 50%. And that's just a reality that we have to learn how to take care of people with dementia. And for the most part, that falls to family caregivers. We also have an increase in multi-generational households. And not only do we have a sandwich generation, but we have something called the club sandwich generation. And that is a 4-generation household living under one roof. We also have an interesting trend among millennials who are boomeranging back home. And when I graduated college way back in 1980, that was actually the lowest point of young people moving back home. It was 11%. And no offense to anyone, but if you did that, you were kind of considered a loser. Now, it's really more of the norm. It's up to 36% of young adults are going back home for largely economic reasons. And I was just speaking to a millennial the other day. It's more expensive. When I graduated college, I owned a $15 bicycle. I didn't have a cell phone, and my rent was $110 a month. Nowadays, just to live, it is more expensive, and there's less of a generation gap. So millennials are living at home with all their creature comforts, but that can put an additional financial strain on the sandwich generation caregivers. So what are some of the challenges for a workforce, particularly an aging workforce? Well, many of you are probably familiar with the MetLife study that looked at the financial consequences of disruption among caregiving employees. And we know that there's a huge productivity impact for employees who are caring for their aging parents. 69% of them are reporting some kind of work disruption. And how does that manifest itself? Well, those of you who have either been in this situation or know people who have been in this situation, it is virtually impossible not to spend some of your time during the day dealing with caregiving issues. Why? Because that's when doctors might be available. That's when the home care agencies need to be contacted. That's when mom or dad may be calling you. And it's very stressful to have a demanding job and getting that call in the middle of the day that something has fallen through with a caregiver or that there's a health crisis with a parent. And you pretty much have to drop everything and deal with that issue. And I mentioned before the impact on a caregiver's health. So that directly impacts the bottom line of a company. Their insurance rate goes up and their health care costs increase as well. And that's to the tune of about $13 billion annually. So we see more and more now a trend on employee wellness. How do you keep people healthy? How do you keep people engaged? How do you keep them focused? And many people, when they've tried everything and they don't feel that they can manage their caregiving responsibilities and their job, they leave the workforce. Well, we know that there's a huge financial impact over a lifetime of lost wages, Social Security benefits, and retirement income for those employees. Plus, it's more difficult to re-engage back into the workforce. There's also the FMLA, the Family Medical Leave, which does allow caregiving employees to take some time and to be able to focus exclusively on caregiving while at the same time having their job held for them and being able to return to work. So what do employees want? Well, one of the #1 things is flexibility, and we're hearing a lot on the topic of flexibility these days. In the recent White House Summit on Working Families, the national government called for an expansion of workplace flexibility and said that it's not a frill, it's a basic need for caregiving employees. We look at countries like the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand, and they have pioneered workplace laws that grant caregiving employees the right to request flexible work arrangements and require organizations not necessarily to grant them, but to make some attempt at accommodation. Recently, San Francisco had an ordinance called the Friendly Workplace Ordinance. And I always look out west when I want to see what kind of trends are maybe coming our way in the East Coast and across the country. And apparently San Francisco is one of the lowest percentage of children for any city in the country, according to the last census. So they are trying to address the issue of family flight. And one way that they're doing this is to require companies to accommodate as best they can flexibility. And I can tell you also from the stories I've heard from caregiving employees, if they don't have flexibility to be able to do their jobs, to address the needs of their loved ones, it's just not going to work. And I've heard stories of employees who were not granted this flexibility, and they've had to leave their jobs. At the same time, I've heard some really wonderful stories. One parent told me that his child had a potentially life-threatening illness, and the company told him to take as much time off as he needed. And when he did go back to work eventually, I can tell you the loyalty he had to that organization was enormous, and the stories that were generated about that company were incredible. So I think you really get back the investment many times over. And word travels fast. We're now in a very competitive environment where companies can also potentially face workplace discrimination lawsuits if they specifically target caregiving employees and don't attempt to address their needs. But flexibility is important, but it's a foundation. It's not enough. Employees also need information, and not cookie-cutter information. They need information that's really specific to their needs. And Ronnie May will certainly speak to this more, but one of my passions in establishing the program that we have here at Care.com is to be able to look at every caregiver as a unique situation and to address their needs and the needs of their family members according to their situation. And it makes a really big difference in outcome. And they need expertise, people who really understand the senior care landscape and can help guide them across the complexities of a fragmented healthcare system, multiple payers, and of course multiple decision makers among family members, which is another added area of stress and confusion for family caregivers. And they need a break. They need respite. You can't keep this up 24/7, and there are sources for respite care in terms of our backup care program and our in-home provider network that we can help employees with to take some time off. So what do employers need? Well, they need an engaged, productive workforce. And they want to be able to attract and retain their top talent. And we're seeing more and more companies reach out to us saying, hey, you know, we really want to recruit this great professor or this very high-level tech talent. But problem is he's got a mother or father living in one city and wants to move to another city. What are we going to do? Well, we can step in and actually help with that relocation plan from a senior care perspective, because that could be one of the boondoggles preventing someone from either taking a job or being able to stay in a job. And I think there's, you know, in addition to the real hardcore metrics that we saw that cost employers dollars for disengaged caregivers, we also see some softer benefits, being an employer of choice, instilling loyalty among employees. And I speak at companies around the country around senior care issues, and one of the things I hear over and over again is, wow, it's really great to work in a company that not only acknowledges that this is an issue in the workforce, but is doing something about it. I feel like I can sort of come out of the closet and now give voice to some of the problems and challenges that I'm facing. And that in and of itself really helps people seek out support and be able to stay engaged at work while getting the support that they need. There was a recent report that probably some of you saw. It was written by the National Alliance for Caregiving and REACT. I'm a member of REACT. It's, the acronym stands for Respecting a Caregiver's Time. It's a coalition of organizations that have come together and said, let's look at best practices on how to do that. And some of the things that they came up with are employees really are relying more and more on technology. They are looking for online resources to help guide them through caregiving. And so it's important to have a place where people can go so they can figure out the landscape from a technology resource standpoint. And we are seeing more and more that the one-size-fits-all doesn't really fit all. And I know Ronnie May is going to be able to speak to that, but employers are saying we want the best in class for child care, for on-site child care, for senior care, for wellness, as opposed to going to one vendor doing all of it. And that actually poses more of a challenge from a managing vendor standpoint. But at the same time, you get the highest quality, and it really is more of a heterogeneous approach. Backup care is a real great tactical way to get in-home care in a very short notice, both in terms of child and adult backup care. And people need information. They need, like, what is Medicare going to pay for? What is Medicaid? What about long-term care insurance? And oh, by the way, my dad's a veteran, and he's actually entitled to long-term care in a veterans facility, which happened to be the case with my dad. One of the questions we often get is, well, you know, if I buy this program for my caregiving employees, will anyone actually use it? And that's where having multiple champions really comes into play. We are driving utilization. We feel like we've got skin in the game along with our corporate clients. It's in our best interest to be able to get people to use this benefit. That's what we're here for. But you've got to really get yourselves out there. We do on-site seminars. You have to talk about it. You have to leverage testimonials, because there's nothing more powerful than a word-of-mouth experience from the colleague who's sitting next to you or your boss. It's important that frontline managers understand how to address the needs of caregiving employees, and that they themselves know what resources are available to employees and can direct them to these supports accordingly. And lastly, it's really essential to create a caregiver-friendly workplace. And I've worked in both. I've worked in places that are, and I've worked in places that have not been. I'm happy to work in a place that's committed to a caregiver-friendly workplace, not just by its own example, but by offering supports to other organizations to do the same. And I don't see how people can sustain being a caregiver for long when their employer is not acknowledging this as an issue and helping them figure out strategies to be able to sustain really what can be a very long journey through different caregiving challenges, and then at the same time to be able to really focus on your workplace, because ultimately it's really great to be able to have a place to go, to be able to contribute and feel good about your career, but not feel that you're ignoring your parents, your children, and your other caregiving responsibilities. So I'm going to end there and turn over to my colleague Ronnie Mae Weiss, who's going to tell us what did MIT do and why.
Thanks, Jody. Well, MIT has had a long history of really supporting its caregiving employees. And the way that that has happened is really through leadership in the work-life area for over 25 years. So basically what we have at MIT is 12,000 employees, over 500 postdoctoral fellows, and all of these employees are housed in different schools. So we have a School of Architecture and Planning, School of Engineering, School of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences, an MIT Sloan School of Management, and a School of Science. And as you can imagine, all of these different schools run things in their own way. And the one thing we have in common with all of them is we support the caregiving needs of all of their employees, and that includes faculty, staff, postdoctoral associates, and fellows. And then, in addition, and very importantly, is we support about 12,000 students, graduates and undergraduate students. So I arrived at MIT a year ago, and what I realized is really we had a very strong work-life support network at the Institute. We already had seminars on parenting, parenting infant toddlers, school-age children, adolescents, and adult children. We also had on-site child care centers serving 395 children. We had backup adult and backup child care services through care.com. And also we have a special graduate school program, which really supports our graduate school students in their research and their work with backup care. We also provide one-on-one work-life consultations. We have a work-life resource and referral program. We have a work-life lending library. An individual on campus provides funds for an emergency relief fund, so people come to the Work-Life Center when there is an emergency and we can support them through that emergency. Lactation rooms across campus, an adoption program, and a job flexibility process and recommendation. So when I arrived and I looked at the demographics of MIT and I spoke with people, I realized what people really were understanding the Work-Life Center's priorities were for the parenting side of caregiving in terms of our very strong on-site child care centers, where we have 4 MIT campus centers and 1 at Lincoln Laboratory. And we have monthly child care briefings and parenting seminars. We also have a child care scholarship program because the financial piece, as Jody said, is really essential. And we cannot undervalue that as a source of stress for people in the sandwich generation. These days, a child care center in Massachusetts, to have your child in a child care center full-time is $24,000 a year or more. You take that and then you take the cost of caregiving, which Jody, you said was at least $5,000 per family, and up to $8,000 or $10,000 if you're a long-distance caregiver. So you take those financial burdens as well as saving for college for your children and saving for one's own retirement, and the stress and the financial concerns are there for people. We also on campus do one-on-one child development consultations, and we have a child care school age care resource and referral service. So we really have a robust support system for caregivers, but a little bit weighted on caregiving for children. And so we have all the other pieces that I believe are the foundations for creating a caring work environment. So, of course, that includes FMLA, sick personal vacation days, flexible work arrangements, backup adult and child care, dependent care, flexible spending accounts, long-term care insurance, both for employees and their families. So I, for example, can take out long-term care insurance for my parents through the MIT plan. The Emergency Relief Fund, and then what we really did, because we heard over and over that parents needing to pay for their children's college education was causing severe financial burden. So what MIT did institute is a loan. And so basically there's a children's scholarship loan program. And it has a limit, and the interest rate changes every year depending on what the interest rates are in the country. But basically it's a low-cost loan for each child who's going to college. And then we have many seminars, and we try to create a supportive culture. But what I realized is MIT has a growing aging workforce. Many industries do, especially the higher education industry. With our faculty not having mandatory retirement and our staff not having mandatory retirement, as an industry, institutes of higher education have a larger number of employees than most industries who are aging and therefore caring for aging relatives. And that really, for us at MIT, when I looked at it, fit in terms of the faculty and the staff demographics. The other thing is we have many international students and staff and faculty, and they are caring for their aging relatives all over the globe. And we saw an increase requests for leave, and this speaks to what you're talking about, Jody. If people feel they just can't manage caring for either a special needs child, a child whose child care falls through, or an aging parent whose care falls through, or it's an emergency and they don't have it. If they don't have those supports in place, and what I've really learned is if they don't know what the possibilities are. I mean, no one gets a degree in caring for an aging parent. One doesn't read a book and have all the answers. It surprises most of us. I myself am a baby boomer caring for an aging parent. It surprises us when you realize my parent needs a different level of attention. And when that happens in an emergency, many employees feel they have no choice but to depart their workplace or take a leave. And that, as you know, puts a lot of pressure on the department and the coworkers and the managers of that employee who feel they need to take a leave to care for their children or their aging parent. So what we also realized is since many people come from MIT, from all over the country and all over the globe, there are many employees who are caring for their aging relatives who live far away. And that's a challenge also, as we know. So what we really felt we needed to do, looking at our demographics and looking at the increasing needs, is we needed to build a program. And we needed to build a program, and we really needed to be responsive to our population who were both caring for children as well as parents. So what we did at first is basically said, okay, let's test this. Let's see if the demographics hold true in terms of people's life experiences. So we put together, with Care.com and Jody's support and her team support, the elder care team support, an entire senior care planning program. We had 5 seminars on all the key issues, and from the moment we communicated this to our employees, both electronically, in paper, in posters, in department meetings that I personally went to and communicated to everyone. In our first seminar, I think, Jody, what did we have, over 80 people?
Yeah, it was a great turnout, and I think it really showed the, not just the interest, but the great need that people had to learn and get support around caregiving.
And then what we did after each seminar is we asked people who attended what worked for them, what are their issues, and what would they like to see in terms of support. And what we really heard from them were a couple of key things. One is, couldn't we have an ongoing caregiving support group over lunch in the workplace around those people who were providing care to elderly relatives who had dementia or Alzheimer's? That was just something that one seminar wasn't going to sort of give them the beginning and end. But also the seminars really provided basic information, but it didn't go far enough to give individual support and individual planning and answers to everyone's individual situation. So
one thing I just was going to throw out, which I thought was particularly moving at one of the seminars that I did on dementia, is that one employee attended because his dad had dementia, and he brought his mother to the seminar, his wife, and he took his 12-year-old daughter out of school for that hour to attend the presentation. And I thought, wow, that's really great that he feels that there's that kind of resource and that kind of opportunity to educate not only himself, but his entire family.
Yeah, and that family wrote us a note afterwards thanking us so much for the effort. So what we've put in place, which actually is starting this month in July, is an entire new caregiver support program. And what that is going to include is continuation of the seminars, because information is very helpful. And the fact that people can just talk about it. And many people brought like their colleagues. They found out about it and they invited their colleagues. And we did it over lunchtime so people could feel like they could take the time. All of our seminars are an hour and a half because people have questions, but the content is an hour, so if people do need to leave, they can, and then they can send in their questions. So back to our plan. So our plan is to continue the seminars. We're going to have 2 ongoing support groups. One will be on caregiving for your elderly relative or parent who is really struggling with Alzheimer's or dementia. And then we're deciding what the other one is, and basically we're going to send out a survey to all of the employees who came to any of the senior care seminars to see what they want. It might be general or it might be specific. In addition, what we realized is people kept Jody and her entire team like for about another hour afterwards, asking them, their situation. And what happens in these seminars is there's always a balance, right? Because people want to share their own stories. They want to get answers to their own situation, but people really want the information. And that tension in the seminar, anyone who gives these presentations and seminars feels that. So what I realized is, we don't want that tension. We want to give people the time to ask their questions that they have and get specific resources for their individual situation. So we have started, as of this month, a senior care planning program. And what that will mean for all of the MIT employees is that they will be able to call care.com and speak to a geriatric social worker and speak to their specific needs. And what's interesting is, in addition to that, because we already have the backup care model, the adult backup care model, people who now just call up and say, I need backup care for my mom, I need someone to take my mom to the doctor every Tuesday morning, that they'll have someone who will say, well, tell us more. We can get you the backup care, but tell me more about the situation. What else might we help you put in place? Because the thing is, people don't know what they don't know. They don't know that there is even someone who can take their mom to the doctor every Thursday morning at 10 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
They don't know that there are resources that can help them find appropriate housing. They are simply looking on Google and guessing instead of really having someone who knows what the possibilities are. So I really see this as a multi-step process. First, people have to be informed. It's a new time in their life, whether they're caregiving for their children and they're caregiving for their elderly parents. It's a new time in life. They have to be informed. They have to know what the roadmap looks like and what they have to be prepared for. So we do that through our seminars. We do that through sending information and having that on our website. But now what we've been able to do is really offer people another approach, a more personalized approach, where they can both find out all the resources that are available, including a geriatric care manager coming to the home and really seeing what's happening, including elder care lawyers, including housing, including planning, including sibling issues and how to work so each sibling can maybe have a role in the caregiving needs. And then what we're doing is we're going to try something, and we're going to have a care.com geriatric social worker on site at MIT 2 days a week. And that will allow people to come and we'll set up appointments and have personal consultations, as well as that geriatric social worker will run our support groups, which is great because everyone will get to know her and also get to know the resources that are available to them. So we hope with this new plan to help people understand the landscape of caregiving that they are entering into, as well as get the support that they need. The other big thing I wanted to say is that educating managers is also a key piece to this puzzle. Because if a manager doesn't understand how best to respond to family caregiver needs, and even what the stress is like and what the life is like of someone who is caregiving for both children and elders, they cannot be supportive. So we, this fall, will take on that manager development. I don't like to call it training. It's really manager development and education around the caregiving journey that their employees have, and how, by supporting them through flexibility and these programs and resources that MIT will now have, that support that they as the individual's manager can give will make the difference between, you know, an engaged employee or someone who feels they have to leave because they have all these caregiving responsibilities. And with that, we're also instituting, MIT has a very strong wellness program, but we're actually going to be partnering with them, and we'll be having a health coach also on site so that people can really start working on taking care of themselves as well. So we're matching that. We're really modeling that, the importance of taking care of yourself with wellness consultations, wellness programs, mindfulness programs, and then a health coach who will see people at the Work-Life Center as well. So that's a little bit of what we're doing. We're also going to try out grief counseling, because that's something that in most employee settings, people have told us, you know, I lost my mom and I came back to work 4 days later, and I wasn't ready, and there was no support. So we're going to be adding that grief counseling to our services. And we're giving financial and legal consultation, and we're really trying to support the employees we have in the sandwich generation around college planning and financial planning, because that's usually what's happening in many families. It's like children are off to college, you have to save for college, you have to plan, the finances are real, as well as you're having additional finances over caring for your aging parents. So we're really building up our financial planning services to our employees. So that's a little bit about what we are up to, and if people have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And also, we really did have a communication strategy to let our employees know about these new services, because some of the services are new, some we've had for many years, but the process of ongoing communication and creating buzz about the program really started with us getting people to the seminars, because when you have people there, you can tell them about the other resources that are available to them. So that's what we're up to at MIT this year. We're pretty excited about it, and so I'd be happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Ronnie, May, and Jody. We do have time for a few questions. First question is for you, Jody. If my company added senior care planning as a service, would seminars like the ones you offered to Ronnie May at MIT be part of their program, that program at my organization?
Yes, and we feel strongly that we need to get in front of employees, and I think Ronnie May gave a really good example that you have to have a multi-pronged strategy to be able to get people to trust that this is a really meaningful program with people who have the expertise, they have the resources, they have the information, and an email is just not enough. So we like to get in front of employees. We really work with the HR work-life teams. I, along with members of my team, go all over the country. Our account managers help set this up, and we do webinars too. And it really has made a difference. We actually look at the trends of utilization, and inevitably after one of these on-sites, the spike goes up in terms of people calling. And I do have to do a little bit of a shout out to Ronnie May in terms of how she does this. She has some kind of an algorithm about when she sends out the notices, like on a Monday, and you do follow-ups, because one of the challenges we have is that not a lot of people will show up. But it's really possible to get people to show up. You just have to have a good system in place about communicating and reminding people to do that.
Great. Thank you so much. Ronnie May, the next question is for you. How long did the process take of the initial idea to implement senior care through approvals, through the ultimate rollout this month for you?
I would say it took us about 7 months. It might take other organizations more or less, but because we already had certain things in place, and the Work-Life Center was really known for providing quality programming, and that did speak to why people came to the seminars. The Work-Life Center did have a history of providing high-quality seminars and programs, and we were fortunate that we found a partner and are confident of the quality. So for us, it took 7 months, and really the rollout is this month.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Time for just a few more questions. That did roll in. Another quick question for Ronnie May, if you don't mind. We had a listener who was curious about the manager training that you mentioned that you're doing at MIT. Can you describe that manager training program? Is it part of another training program? Did you start it from scratch?
Okay. Well, that will probably be, we can have another webinar in a few months, and I can tell you more about it. But throughout the Institute, the question of flexibility and the value of flexible work arrangements has come up, and it will probably fit into that piece. So we know it has to be done, and what we've decided we're going to do first and foremost is, as part of the launch of our senior care planning program, we will do key department meetings, and that's the way we'll inform managers, and then we'll get into really manager development around understanding. If that answers the question, I hope it does.
Great. Jody, you had mentioned the importance of leveraging testimonials. What's the best way I at my organization could go about doing somewhat of a casual survey to find out what my employee support needs are? Because, you know, to your point, sometimes they, especially for elder care issues, they aren't openly talked about. So do you find informal surveys to be effective? What would be your recommendation there?
I think it's a really good way to gauge what your population is and what their needs are. You may find that your employees are not in the throes of caregiving, but they're in the sweet spot of caregiving. So, looking at the demographics and how many people have aging parents, but I think they're helpful. What might even trump that is, getting in front of people, as Ronnie May did, because then you're really having a conversation with people and saying, look, I'm doing these seminars because we want to find out from you directly if this is a need, is it in my head, is this real, and if so, what are the specifics of that need? I think it was more effective than just sending out an email. And then you got some really meaningful data and specifics about what people wanted.
Right, and then also for us, we had data, we had information to go to our managers with to say, here's the response to the seminars. There is an interest here. There is a need. Let's put together a very strong support program. So that really, it's a good way to gauge because it's in person and real time. And then we always did send a survey afterwards, which then basically got thoughtful information from people because they had already attended the seminar.
Okay, we have time for just one last question here. So in terms of your program at MIT, Ronnie May, if you could please describe the adult backup care benefit and what the financial benefit or ROI would be to your institution. Is that something you can measure? Just how are you going about looking at that?
Okay. Well, MIT has provided the adult backup care support as well as the child care backup care support for many years. So we have been able to watch it and learn from people who were using it. And what really happened is it came down to testimonials. People said, because I had the adult backup care, someone to watch my mother every morning before she went to her day program, I could keep my job. And this was faculty members also. We had female faculty members who felt they might have to leave their position because of caregiving responsibilities. But through the information and knowledge of the program and then utilizing the program, they were able to stay and continue their research. I mean, at MIT, a lot of our work is about the research and the finding cures for major illnesses in the world, and to lose our staff, whether they're faculty or lab directors, really can harm the research. So for us as an institute of higher education and an employer, we needed to support our caregivers, and the backup care service the adult backup care service has done that. And very quickly, I can give you a personal example, which is I'm here in Boston. Adult care is not just for your aging family members, it's for the adults in your life. I have an adult child who's 31 who lives in LA. He broke his foot, and I thought I would need to fly out to LA and go and take care of him. And then I remembered we have backup care, and it's adult backup care. And so what we did for my son is we had a caregiver go to his house once a week, that's all he felt he needed, to provide service, take him to the doctor, go food shopping for him, take care of his needs, so that, yes, I did go on a long weekend to visit him, and so did everyone in the family, but we did not have to take a leave from work to care for an adult member of our family.
And that's also, by the way, true of senior care planning. We've renamed it Adult and Senior Care Planning because we're trying to encourage employees, if they have care needs for themselves or any adult member of their family, it's not only for seniors, and you know, it's much more comprehensive than that. And our definition of family is pretty broad too, because some people are taking care of grandparents, aunts, uncles, siblings. Right. So it's really for any family caregiving responsibility for an adult that you have.
Right, and we did hear, again, the testimonials to really be specific about how do we look at the value of this program. We have employees who use it every year, you know, when they have certain tests that they have to take and they say you can't drive home. So it's self-care, it's spousal or partner care, and adult family members. So it is broad, and people use it in a broad way. And those testimonials help people understand, oh, I can use it when I have to go to the doctor and I didn't have a ride home. So you don't have to about wellness. You don't have to cancel that colonoscopy because you don't know how you're going to get home, or that eye appointment. You can call the backup care service and have someone take you home.
Great. All right. Thank you so much both again. It looks like we are out of time for today. If you did submit a question and we unfortunately didn't have time to get back to you, our contact information slide has been on your screen for a few minutes now. We would love to hear from you either by phone or by email. And as I mentioned, we'll also be reaching out to each of you within the next few days with a copy of the presentation and a link to the webinar recording. So we will be in touch. Thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.